Good evening. I hope that you're having a Thanksgiving that's as great as General Michael Flynn's must be now that he has his freedom. And even though today is a holiday, there is a ton of news coming out on the election fraud front, including 2 federal lawsuits that were brought forth by Sidney Powell in Georgia and Michigan, everything that came out of yesterday's Pennsylvania hearings, as well as how some districts in Wisconsin had voter turnouts that were above 100%. So grab a turkey leg and some gravy, and let's go through these things together. This is your 2020 election update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. The people in this country, they know that the legacy media outlets are not reporting things accurately. And that's a very mild way to put what they're doing. I mean, people are, and I include myself in this, sick and tired of the false narratives being pushed upon them. And they're looking for an honest source of news that presents the full picture. And that is exactly what we are working to do here. We show you the full picture, we present to you the news, letting you make up your own mind, and we investigate the socialist and communist subversion of this country. Things that are either ignored or laughed at by the legacy media. You know, yesterday at the Pennsylvania election fraud hearing, Rudy Giuliani said it really well.
There's been censorship that I've never seen before, of an incredible nature by big tech, big networks, big companies. They only allow one side to be heard, and they refuse to allow the other side to be heard. It's almost as if they're afraid the American people, if they should learn these facts, will find out just who they are and what they're about.
But don't be discouraged. Instead, I would implore you to smash that like button that's below this video. That way, the YouTube algorithm will be forced to share this video out to thousands of more people, spreading the truth far and wide. Now let's begin our discussion over in Georgia. Now for context, if you don't remember, at the request of the Trump campaign, Georgia is currently in the midst of a second recount. Now late yesterday evening, Sidney Powell filed a federal lawsuit alleging massive election fraud, multiple violations of the Constitution, multiple violations of Georgia state laws, as well as issues with the Dominion voting systems. So what kind of evidence did she present? Well, her 104-page complaint alleges that fraud was executed by many different means. And these include 96,000 absentee ballots that were requested and counted, but were never recorded as actually being returned by the voter. It includes good old-fashioned computerized ballot stuffing, which allegedly made use of some structural issues with the Dominion voting system, like how they don't have a real-time log, and how some of these machines were actually connected to the internet during the election. And the lawsuit also mentions how in Fulton County, which is in Georgia, at about 10 p.m. on election night, every single poll worker and poll challenger were evacuated from the building for several hours. Why? Well, they claim that there was a water leak. But according to this lawsuit, there is video evidence that there was no water leak. And you want to know the kicker? For those several hours that everybody was kicked out of the building, there were election workers who stayed back and unsupervised and unchallenged worked at the voting tabulation machines. Now yesterday, Dominion Voting Systems released a statement saying that the claims that their systems deleted or switched votes were completely false, and that their systems are 100% auditable. Now who's telling the truth and who's lying? Well, it's up to the courts to make that decision, but I will leave you with this. Texas evaluated and decided to ultimately not use the Dominion voting system. And when they did, their Secretary of State came out and he said that it was because of a lack of evidence of efficiency and accuracy and to be safe from fraud and unauthorized manipulation. So I'll let you decide for yourself, and I'll also throw the links to the article as well as the full 104-page lawsuit filed by Sidney Powell in the description box below this video so you can check it out for yourself. Now let's move over to Pennsylvania. Yesterday in Gettysburg, the Senate held a public hearing on voter fraud. I watched it, and some of the examples given by the witnesses there were soul-stirring. Multiple witnesses who worked as poll observers in Pennsylvania testified to being either obstructed or kept so far away from the counting of ballots that they had no idea what was going on. Just listen to this. It's a witness testimony from a poll observer about how far away he was kept.
All observers were corralled behind the fence. More than 100 board workers were processed and opened mail-in ballots on the other side of the fence. These masked workers were arranged throughout the 120,000 square feet at a distance from the observers of about 10 feet to more than 200 feet away from us.
Can you imagine being kept 20, 50, or even 200 feet away while trying to observe someone fiddling with envelopes? I mean, it's a joke. It would literally be impossible to see anything. There were photos I remember circulating a few weeks back online of poll observers who were literally having to use binoculars to be able to see anything. Another witness at this hearing testified about mysterious spikes of votes that arrived in Pennsylvania, about 600,000 of them. And when he was asked about how many were for Trump versus Biden, well, listen to his answer yourself, and then also listen to the audience's response.
And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represent over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
Can you even imagine? Out of these 600,000 mysterious ballots, just over 3,000 were for Trump. That's less than 1%. That's in fact half of 1%. There is no area, no matter how liberal in this country, where you can find numbers like that. I heard a joke the other day that if you ran this election at the headquarters of the Communist Party USA, you would still get more votes for Trump. And yet questioning this odd reality has you branded as a conspiracy theorist by the mainstream media. Now, besides that, at this Pennsylvania hearing, Rudy Giuliani brought up the massive discrepancies in vote counts. For instance, he talked about how in Pennsylvania, 1.8 million absentee ballots were mailed out to voters, but 2.5 million of them came back. Listen yourself.
You sent out in the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania 148 absentee or mail-in ballots. You received back 1.4 million approximately. However, in the count for president, you counted 2.5 million.
Later, he also discussed some of the impossible dates that were stamped on the ballots, such as tens of thousands of votes that came back on the same day they were mailed out, or even votes that came back on the day before they were mailed out. Take a listen.
22,686 mail-in ballots that were returned on the day they were mailed. How about 32,591 were returned the day after they were mailed? Another 20,000 were returned before they were mailed. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. Probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
And this is just a small sampling of what took place at yesterday's hearing. In total, it was 3.5 hours of detailed testimony. Facts, figures, graphs, witnesses. I'll throw the link to the full hearing in the description box below this video. Even though it's long, I would highly recommend that you check it out for yourself. Now let's talk a little bit about Wisconsin. Our reporters did some digging, and this is what they found. About 13,000 less people voted this year in Milwaukee compared to 2016. However, in several Milwaukee neighborhoods, the number of ballots dramatically increased. Now, for your reference, Milwaukee is broken up into 300 wards, and one of these wards had a voter turnout of over 105%. They must be very enthusiastic over in Milwaukee. The ward in question is Ward 235. It had 1,768 votes cast this year. And out of them, 1,391 were for Biden and 339 were for Trump. Okay, but that ward only had a voting eligible population of 1,680. And that's according to the Milwaukee Election Commission, which we looked and it did match the census data. Doesn't make sense though. How can they have more votes than voters? Other wards in Milwaukee had voter turnouts ranging from 92% to 97%, and they overwhelmingly voted for Biden. Now that is an unprecedented turnout. And by that, I mean it's an unrealistic turnout. Because for your reference, in 2016, not a single ward in Milwaukee crossed the 90% threshold. If you want to dive deeper into this data yourself, if you want to look at the numbers and the neighborhood breakdowns, we'll throw the links in the description box below this video. Also, in yesterday's episode of this show, we discussed how a research group identified 144,000 potentially fraudulent ballots in Wisconsin. I'll throw the link to that video in the top right corner right here for you to check out for yourself. Now, everything that we discussed today is properly sourced, fact-based, and you can find every link in the description box below this video. But the mainstream media still mocks and dismisses these claims and credible allegations as conspiracy theories and imaginings, which is exactly why a free and honest media is so important to our republic. Without knowing the truth, without knowing the facts of the situation, we're pretty much driving blind. Which is why I would highly recommend that if you have not already, smash that like button that's below this video. That way, the YouTube algorithm will be forced to share this video out to thousands of more people and let the truth be known far and wide. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel because we will have some deep investigations coming in the very near future. Yesterday I mentioned this as well. One of our journalists is working on a really interesting story about cash for votes, people who are actually buying votes with cash. He told me that he actually finished all of the research for that article. All he's now doing is writing the words. So subscribe to the channel, look out for that story in the coming days, and until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.